They told you she would be the missing piece, the answer to your chaos, the hand that would hold you when the world turned cruel. And you believed it not because you were weak, but because the world fed you that belief from the moment you could. Understand words? She was the prize in every fairy tale, the muse behind every tortured genius, the mother who sacrificed, the lover who forgave, the angel who waited. You were never taught to see her as a person. You were taught to see her as salvation. And what were you supposed to be in that story? The hero, the protector, the provider, the one who proves his worth to win her grace. But what if that story wasn't written for your growth, but for your obedience? What if the woman you think you love is not even real, at least, not in the way you imagine? What if she's not a mirror of your soul, but a mirror of your misunderstanding? Aristotle, yes, that Aristotle didn't write poetry about love. He didn't romanticize femininity. He didn't place women on pedestals carved from ideals. In longing, he observed nature without filter, without myth, without mercy gotten in that cold clarity. He said something the world still can't stomach. The female is a mutilated male. But this wasn't a statement of hatred, it was a description of how nature designs difference, not in morality, not in soul, but in form and function. He wasn't saying she is lesser, he was saying she is other, that truth. It doesn't flatter, it doesn't comfort, and maybe that's why it was buried under centuries of poetry, romance, and fairy tales, because when you strip the illusion, you're left with something far more difficult to face, that the love you think you feel may not be love at all. It might be dependency wrapped in longing, idealization disguised as intimacy, and worse. It might be about power. Think about it. When you say you're in love, what do you actually mean? That you see her clearly? Or that she makes you feel something you desperately want to feel about yourself? You don't want her presence. You want her approval. You don't want her truth. You want her softness. You don't want her as she is. You want her as you imagine her to be. And here's the haunting part. She knows, maybe not consciously, not maliciously, but instinctively, because she's been shaped not to dominate, but to survive. Survival doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like sweetness. Sometimes it sounds like empathy. Sometimes it feels like love. But what if it's strategy? What if her warmth is not a reflection of your worth, but a reflection of what you want to believe? And what if you've spent your whole life calling it romance, when really it was just rehearsed closeness built on your fear of being alone? No one teaches you this, not your teachers, not your father, not your culture, because they want you to believe the fantasy. They want you to keep chasing the image, because a man who's chasing an image is a man who will do anything to feel enough. But Aristotle wasn't writing for comfort, he was writing for truth. And maybe, if you're brave enough to let the fairy tale crack, you'll start to see her not as your savior, not as your dream, but as something far more powerful. A reflection. Not of what you love, but of what you fear. We love to believe that love is mutual, that it flows equally in both directions, that when we give, we receive, that when we open ourselves, someone opens back. But what if that's not how nature designed it? What if love at its core isn't about balance, but about leverage? Aristotle didn't see the world through rose-colored stories. He saw it through the sharp lens of reality. Through structure, function, adaptation. He wasn't writing for lovers, he was writing for philosophers, for seekers of truth, not comfort. So when he looked at the relationship between man and woman, he didn't call it sacred. He called it strategy, because that's what nature is, not cruel, not kind, just calculating. And what he noticed? We still refuse to admit that women are not built to offer truth. They're built to adapt to power, not because they're dishonest, not because they're inferior, but because nature gave them a different path to survival. You want to believe her love is pure, that it has no agenda, but purity doesn't survive in a world where strength is rewarded. Purity doesn't navigate systems where power decides value. Adaptation does. You see softness, you call it beauty. You see emotion, you call it depth. But what if that softness is a strategy? What if that emotion is a language she learned because power won't listen to anything else? She's not lying. She's surviving, and in a world built by men, surviving means knowing how to bend just enough to stay in control. Without ever appearing like she's taking it. That's not manipulation. That's nature. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. While you were busy trying to impress her, she was busy learning you, not because she's evil, but because she had to. She watches. She remembers your tone, your pace, your doubts, your wounds. Every confession you thought brought you closer, brought her insight. Every crack you revealed, every shadow you exposed became a map. You thought you were being vulnerable. She saw leverage. Again, not because she wants to hurt you, but because when you don't have strength and structure, you learn to survive in silence. She doesn't fight the way you do. She doesn't conquer through force. She conquers through relevance. She becomes necessary. She becomes your compass, your comfort, your craving, and you, without realizing it, start to orbit around her. Around her needs, her moods, her attention. You say it's love, but really, it's obedience dressed up as devotion. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing her as a partner. You started seeing her as your mirror, and as long as she reflects what you want to believe, you feel whole. But the second that mirror cracks, the second she stops feeding your illusion, you don't just feel rejected, you feel erased because you didn't fall in love with her. You fell in love with the feeling of being loved by her. And that's the difference Aristotle wanted you to see. He wasn't saying she's incapable of love. He was saying her love is not what you think it is. It's not without purpose. It's not without instinct. It's not without a price. Because in nature, nothing is free. Not attention, not affection, not even tenderness. The sooner you understand that, the sooner you stop mistaking strategy for sincerity, and only then can you start to ask the real question, not does she love me, but why does she love me? What does my presence give her? What does my vulnerability unlock for her? Because love without clarity isn't connection. It's captivity, and most men, they don't even see the bars. You say she understands you, that she sees you like no one else, that when you speak, she listens not just to your words, but to the space between them. You say she gets you. But maybe that's not insight. Maybe that's adaptation, because here's the truth. No one tells you she doesn't become what you need out of love. She becomes what you need, because that's how she survives. She's learned how to listen, not to admire you, but to decode you. She's learned how to nod, how to smile at the exact moment you feel seen, how to respond just enough to make you feel safe, how to mirror your pain in a way that makes you think it's shared. You think that's intimacy. But what if it's intelligence? Not the kind measured in grades or degrees, but the kind honed through centuries of emotional survival, the kind passed down quietly from mother to daughter, not in books, but in glances, in warnings, in unspoken lessons. Don't show too much, don't ask too loud, give just enough to stay in control. She doesn't seduce you with lies. She seduces you with yourself, because the one thing she knows for certain is that men don't fall in love with women. They fall in love with the version of themselves that women reflect back. And if she can reflect the version you crave, if she can echo back your strength, your sadness, your hope, you'll follow her anywhere. Not because she controls you, but because she validates you. It feels like magic, but it's actually measurement. Every time you open up, she adjusts. Every time you get cold, she warms. Every time you pull away, she becomes exactly what pulls you back. It's not always conscious. It's not always calculated, but it is always responsive. Because when you're not the center of the world, you don't demand power. You learn to shape it. She doesn't seek to overpower you. She seeks to be indispensable to you, and the easiest way to become essential to a man is to become the emotional language he's too afraid to speak alone. So you call her mysterious. You say she's hard to understand. You call her feminine, as if softness means simplicity, but she's not mysterious. She's meticulous. Every silence from her is a scan. Every tear is a tool. Every withdrawal is a measurement of your response. And you mistake all of it for feeling. But what if it's not feeling? What if it's familiarity? What if she doesn't feel you because of a divine connection, but because she's been studying men like you her entire life? She knows what makes you feel small, she knows how to make you feel seen, and she knows how to walk that tightrope just enough approval to keep you hungry, Just enough affection to keep you obedient? You think she's nurturing? Maybe, or maybe she's navigating, because what you see as softness is often just strategy wrapped in silk. And once you've tasted it, once she's become your emotional oxygen, you don't just desire her, you depend on her, and that's when the power shifts. That's when you start mistaking her choices for your own. That's when your decisions start echoing her voice. That's when you stop being a man with direction and become a man who waits to feel deserving again. Not of her love, but of your own reflection. You say she completes you, but maybe she just became the mirror you were too afraid to face alone. You were never taught to look for strategy and softness. You were told love is pure, that women are gentle by nature, that when she smiles, it's real, that when she cries, it's honest, that when she listens, she's there for you. But what if none of that is simple? What if behind the sweetness is precision? What if the tears aren't weakness, but calibration? Not lies, not manipulation, just adaptation so refined it slips beneath your guard like poetry. She doesn't dominate you. Not the way you understand domination. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't impose. She reflects. She reacts. She shapes herself in response to what you need her to be. And you never notice because she's not trying to take your power. She's waiting for you to hand it over. Willingly. And you do. With every vulnerable confession, you believe you're bonding. But what if she's collecting your pain, your patterns, your pressure points? You say, I love how she listens. But what if she's not listening to connect? She's listening to leverage. I've never told anyone this before. You're the only one who gets me. She hears more than your words. She hears opportunity, because when you speak from wounds, she learns how to move around them, not to hurt you, but to keep you needing her. And there's no stronger power than that. You think love is when someone accepts you, but this isn't about acceptance. It's about adjustment. She doesn't need to overpower your strength. She just needs to become the context. You can't function without, and you don't even realize it. You start second-guessing yourself. You hesitate before saying what you mean. You fold pieces of yourself just to keep peace, and every time you do, she smiles, and you call that love, but it's not love. It's behavioral reinforcement. And here's the part you never saw coming. You trained yourself to please her, because she never asked you to give up your voice. She just responded better when you softened it. She never told you to change your opinions. She just rewarded you more when you agreed. She never said, make me your everything. But she became your emotional home, so when she left, it felt like homelessness. That's the game, not dominance through force, but through subtle necessity. She becomes the voice you hear before every decision, the standard you measure yourself against, the comfort you reach for when you fall. And once that happens, once she becomes your internal compass, you're no longer acting from who you are. You're acting from who you believe she approves of, and that's not connection, that's conditioning. And the most dangerous part, she doesn't even have to try hard, because most of this isn't conscious. It's not evil. It's not pre-planned. It's instinct. It's centuries of inherited strategy. While men built systems of power, women learned to navigate them not with confrontation, but with calculation. She doesn't conquer your body. She occupies your mind. She learns the language of your longing. She memorizes your emotional rhythms. She becomes your mirror, not to reflect your truth, but to shape your belief that you've been seen. And once you believe that, you don't just love her, you need her, not because she's powerful, but because you made her the container for your worth. And from that moment on, you stop loving her as a person and start loving her as a permission slip to feel like you matter. She doesn't steal your identity, you offer it. And when she leaves, when the illusion shatters, you don't miss her. You miss the man you thought you were when she smiled at you. You thought you were loving her. You thought you were giving, sacrificing, proving. You held the door open, said, I'm here for you, gave her the best of you. And every time she smiled, every time she leaned in just enough, you thought, this is connection. But what if it wasn't? What if beneath all the affection, all the shared secrets, all the quiet moments in the dark, you weren't bonding, you were bargaining? You gave her your time, your loyalty, your softness, but what you really offered her was your masculinity. You laid it at her feet, hoping for something simple, validation, that she'd look at you and say, "You're enough, you're safe, you matter." But what if she never meant to say that? What if she didn't even see you, only the version of you she could shape? You weren't loving her. You were offering yourself in exchange for approval, and that's not intimacy, that's emotional obedience. But no one dares to call it that. Because to admit that your love was one-sided, built on a need to be approved of, not seen, is to admit something deeper, that you were never enough for yourself. That you needed someone outside you to tell you who you are. And that's what she understood. Not as a villain, with malice, but with instinct. She saw that craving in your eyes. She recognized it because she's seen it before. And instead of challenging it, she reflected it. She became the version of warmth that kept you chasing. She didn't have to ask for power. You gave it to her, not out of fear, but out of hope. Hope that if you gave enough, she'd finally say the words you couldn't say to yourself. You're good. You're lovable. You're whole. But she never did. Not because she wanted to hurt you, but because she was never here to heal you. She was here to mirror you. And here's the truth you've tried to bury under logic and excuses. She's not looking for truth. She's looking for advantage. Not out of cruelty, out of design. Because when you live in a world that doesn't hand you power, you learn to move quietly through it, not by confronting it head on, but by becoming essential to it. She didn't overpower you. She became the voice you couldn't ignore. The comfort you reached for. When things fell apart, the standard you compared every other woman to. And that's the power no one talks about. Not dominance through strength, but dominance through dependency. She doesn't have to demand anything. She just has to be the one thing you can't stop thinking about. You call it love, but love doesn't erase your sense of self. Love doesn't hollow you out. What you had was attachment built on approval addiction. You gave and gave, not because she asked, but because you believed that if you gave enough, you'd finally feel worthy. And that's not on her, that's on you, because you weren't loving her. You were chasing yourself through her reactions, her praises, her attention. You didn't want a woman. You wanted to be seen through her eyes. But she was never your mirror. She was a screen, a projection surface for every hope you had that someone, anyone, could fill the gap you never faced alone. And now you wonder why it all feels so empty? It's because what you lost wasn't her. It was the illusion that her approval could fix what you were too afraid to confront in silence. You tell yourself she left, that she pulled away, that she changed. But what if the only thing that changed was the performance? What if she didn't abandon you? What if she just stopped reflecting the version of herself you needed to feel whole? And suddenly, without that reflection, you didn't know who you were anymore. Not because she broke you, but because you built yourself around her gaze. The compliments, the soft tone, the affection, all of it was fuel, and you thought it was love, but it was validation in disguise. You weren't building a relationship. You were constructing an identity based on how she made you feel, and when she stopped responding, when she grew distant, colder, quiet, your world didn't fall apart because she was gone. It collapsed because you had nothing left of yourself without her approval. You weren't grieving her. You were grieving the version of you that only existed in her presence. The man who felt seen. The man who felt chosen. The man who felt for a moment like he mattered. But that man wasn't real. He was a mask, a creation, a performance. And the one thing Aristotle knew, what he saw so clearly that it still cuts through centuries of romantic noise. Is this the performance always ends? Not because of evil, not because of betrayal, but because nature doesn't care for illusion. It moves forward, it adapts, it survives. And so did she. You say she used you, but maybe you used her too. You used her as a mirror to see the version of yourself you couldn't find in silence. You used her warmth as a substitute for self-worth. You used her affection to forget your emptiness. You didn't love her. You loved what being loved by her said about you. And when that stopped, when the warmth faded, when the compliments ceased, you were forced to face what you've been running from the whole time. You don't know who you are without being wanted. That's not love, that's dependence, and it leaves you shattered, because without her, you're not just alone, you're undefined. You were never taught how to be whole without a woman at the center of your story. You were raised on myths that told you she would heal you, save you, complete you. So you kept offering yourself, your time, your strength, your truth and hopes. She'd choose you again, but love doesn't work like that. Not real love, because real love doesn't require you to erase your voice. It doesn't demand your obedience. It doesn't trade your authenticity for approval. And yet, that's what you gave her, again and again, not because she asked, but because somewhere deep inside, you believe that her love was the only proof that you were enough. She didn't need to take your power. You handed it to her like a gift, believing that made you noble, but it did in single quotes did. It made you predictable. And predictable. Men are easy to control. Not with force, but with silence, with withdrawal. With just enough affection to keep them questioning their worth. That's not love, that's programming. And you, without even realizing it, were living a life written by someone else, following cues, chasing closeness, avoiding your own reflection, because the scariest thing in the world was never losing her. It was being left alone. With you, you want to believe she deceived you, that she hid her intentions, that she knew exactly what she was doing from the start. But what if she didn't hide it all? What if you handed her the script, and she simply played the role you wrote for her? You said, "I love how honest you are." She learned that honesty was the path to your trust. You said, "I feel safe with you." She discovered that softness was your weakness. You said, "You're the only one who gets me." And in that moment, you gave her the key not to your heart, but to your pattern. Every compliment you gave was a cue, every confession was a map. She didn't need to manipulate you. You taught her how to respond, not with demands, but with emotional cues, not with control, but with reflection. She didn't build the illusion. You built it for her because you needed her to be what you couldn't be for yourself. She didn't need to ask for your power. You offered it, wrapped in phrases like, "I trust you, I need you, you're different." You thought those were declarations of love, but they were instructions, and she followed them perfectly. So now you say, she changed, that she grew cold, that she pulled away, but maybe she didn't change at all. Maybe she just stopped pretending. Maybe she stopped performing the version of herself you were addicted to, the version that kept you obedient, hopeful, dependent. And here you are. Confused. Angry. Broken. Not because she walked away, but because she took the illusion with her. And now you're staring at the wreckage of a relationship that never really existed. You say, "But I loved her." Did you? Or did you love the way she made you feel about yourself? You say, "She understood me." But maybe she just understood what you wanted to hear. Maybe she knew how to echo your pain, just enough to seem like she shared it, but never enough to carry it. You say, "She made me better." Better in whose eyes? Hers, society's? Or in the mirror she held up that told you what you desperately needed to believe? You weren't in love, you were in orbit, around her approval, around her attention, around her emotional availability. And the moment she stopped being the center of your self-worth, you collapsed, not because she left, but because you didn't know how to stand on your own. She became the music, and you danced, thinking it was love, but it wasn't love. It was choreography, and you never noticed. The rhythm was hers. You thought you were choosing her, but really, she was training you. Every gesture, every silence, every withdrawal was a signal, not to destroy you, but to test you. To see how far you'd bend, how much of yourself you'd edit, how willing you were to become hers, and you were willing, eager even, because deep down, you didn't want a partner, you wanted a reflection, you wanted someone to play back the belief that you were worth loving, without ever having to prove it to yourself first. And now the performance is over, the theater is empty, the applause has stopped, and you're left in silence. Not because she stole your voice, but because you stopped using it the moment she started clapping. You keep saying, "She used me." But the question you avoid, the one that twists in your chest late at night, is this: what did you use her for? You didn't just love her, you made her your meaning, you made her the proof that you were enough. You wrapped your entire identity in the way she looked at you, the way she touched you, the way she whispered, "I'm here." But she wasn't your salvation, she was your escape plan from your chaos. From your fear, from your unfinished self. You say she manipulated your emotions, but You handed them to her, didn't you? Like offerings at an altar, not because she demanded them, but because you hoped they'd be enough to make her stay. You didn't want partnership. You wanted permission. Permission to feel worthy. Permission to believe you were lovable. Permission to avoid the inner work that scared you more than heartbreak ever could. And that's the real tragedy. Not that she left, not that she stopped loving you, but that you were never whole. Without her, you stitched your self-worth together using the threads of her approval. And now that she's gone, you're unraveling. Not because you miss her, but because without her, you don't know who you are. And that's what hurts. She didn't break you. She revealed you. She revealed the hollow space you kept filling with her attention. She revealed the fear you disguised as devotion. She revealed how deeply you depended on her reflection to feel like a man, but she didn't sign up to redeem you. She simply walked into the role. You cast for her, she followed the cues, and when the script no longer served her, she stopped acting. Now you're alone, not abandoned. Exposed. Because when the illusion fell away, all that remained was the man you never built, the one who never learned how to stand on his own, the one who kept outsourcing his purpose to another person's gaze. And you're angry. You want to blame her, but deep down you know. You made her the sun and forgot how to shine without her light. She didn't steal your identity. You gave it away. Piece by piece, every time you silenced yourself to keep her smiling. Every time you swallowed your truth to keep her close. Every time you chose her approval over your own authenticity. You didn't fall in love. You abandoned yourself. And now, what you're mourning isn't her loss. It's the absence of the man you thought you were in her arms. The man who only existed in the glow of her affection. The man who never learned to breathe without her reassurance. But this moment of silence, of loss, of unbearable clarity, this is not the end. It's the beginning, because when everything you built on illusion collapses, you finally touch something real. Not her, not the relationship, but you, the raw, uncertain, unvalidated self you've avoided your entire life, the version of you that doesn't perform, doesn't beg, doesn't chase, and that man, the one who can exist without being needed, he's the one who can finally choose love without fear, without losing himself in it. So stop mourning the illusion. Stop grieving the version of you that only came alive in her presence. That wasn't you. That was a shadow. Placeholder, a mask. Now is the time to meet the man beneath it. And maybe just, maybe for the first time in your life, you'll learn to love without abandoning yourself in the process. This is where most men turn back, right here at the threshold of the truth, because it's easier to say, she changed. Easier to call her complicated, easier to whisper to yourself in the dark, she just didn't understand me. But deep down, you know that's not it. She understood you perfectly. She saw through you before you saw yourself, not because she's cruel, because she's clear. She knew what you needed. She knew which parts of yourself you were still ashamed of. She knew how badly you wanted to be enough, without having to do the work of becoming enough. And so she reflected back. What kept you safe? What kept you obedient? What kept you chasing? And you called it love. But it wasn't love. It was a scripted illusion core written by your fantasies and her survival instincts. So now, here's the moment of power. The one that separates boys from men, the one that burns away the story you've been telling yourself for years. You want to be free? Then let it burn. Let the pedestal crack. Let the myth collapse. Let the fantasy drown in its own sweet, poisoned poetry. Because until you stop clinging to the idea that her love will save you, you will never be free to meet her, or anyone, as an equal. You can't love someone while kneeling. You can't lead while begging to be chosen. You can't grow while performing a version of yourself that doesn't exist outside her gaze. So let it go. Let her be human. Let her be flawed, strategic, real. And let yourself be broken, because that's where the truth begins. When you stop needing her to complete you, you finally begin to complete yourself. That's when the dynamic shifts. That's when the power moves not from her hands to yours, but back into your spine. And yes, she feel it. She test it. Because when you stop orbiting, the gravity changes. You no longer chase softness. You no longer need her to be your healer, your mirror, your savior. You don't need her to be gentle to feel whole. You don't need her to Be perfect to feel peace. You stop measuring your value in her approval. And start discovering it in your presence. You finally learn how to stand, not as a reaction, not as a performance, but as a man with depth, direction, and dignity. She may not like it. She may leave. She may try to reshape you into the man who once knelt, but you won't kneel again. Not because you don't love, but because you finally understand what real love is. It's not control. It's not strategy. It's not dependence disguised as devotion. Real love is two people, whole on their own, choosing each other without the need to be rescued. So let the fantasy die, let the story unravel, let the illusion fall away, and meet her or someone else, not as a man begging for worth, but as a man who already knows his own, because until you do, you'll keep attracting the same reflection, the same performance. The same cycle. You'll keep giving your soul away in exchange for a smile. You'll keep folding yourself into a shape that fits her expectations, and you'll keep waking up in the ruins of a love that was never real to begin with. So let it burn. Let every lie you've believed about women, about love, about yourself go up in flames, because only when the fire has cleared, only when you've watched every false piece of yourself turn to ash, can you begin to build something real. And maybe then, when the smoke fades and you can finally see without the fog of need, you'll find her standing there, not as your cure, not as your prize, but as a woman. Real. Whole. And finally, equal. So here you are, not broken, just awake, not lost, just standing, in a life that was never fully yours to begin with. You thought love would fix you. You thought she was the missing piece. But now you see, she wasn't missing. You spent so long shaping yourself into something soft enough to be accepted, that you forgot how to be something solid enough to stand. But here now, without her reflection, without her permission, without her performance, you finally meet the most terrifying person in your world, yourself. And that silence, that ache in your chest where her voice used to live, that's not pain, that's truth. Because beneath the illusions, beneath the projections, beneath the desperate hunger to be chosen, you were always there, a man, not a role, not a mirror, not a shell waiting to be filled with someone else's gaze. You were never supposed to be saved. You were supposed to be seen first by yourself. And once you see yourself, really see yourself, not the man she adored, not the man who needed her softness, not the man who built his spine from borrowed validation, but the raw, unfiltered, unfinished you. That's when it changes. That's when her gaze loses its grip. That's when her absence stops echoing. That's when you stop chasing the chemistry, the chaos, the comfort, and start craving something else entirely. Reality. Not romance built on dependency. Not affection purchased with obedience. Not a woman who performs the version of love that keeps you tame. You don't want that anymore. Not because you're bitter, but because you're free. Because now, love doesn't look like addiction. It looks like presence. It looks like honesty, even when it stings. It looks like boundaries. Not begging. It looks like two whole people choosing each other without needing each other to fill a wound, and she feel it, the next woman, or maybe the same one. She feel the shift. She feel that you don't orbit anymore, that your center doesn't move when hers does, that your love doesn't bend at the sound of her silence. And some won't like that. Some will leave, because when a man no longer performs, some women panic. They can't shape you if you've already shaped yourself. They can't manage you if you've already mastered your own emotions. But the right woman, the one who's also done burning her illusions, she won't try to choreograph you. She meet you fully. Honestly. Without needing to become your reflection. Because she doesn't want your obedience. She wants your truth, and she can only receive it if you've done the work to own it first. So yes, let the myth burn, let the fairy tale dissolve, let the need to be saved die, because love doesn't require a pedestal. It requires a foundation. And when you stand on that foundation, when you hold your center, when you meet the world with your spine intact, you stop chasing women who reflect your fear, and you start attracting women who respect your presence. You don't fall into orbit anymore. You build gravity of your own. And maybe, just maybe, that's what Aristotle meant all along. Not that women are weak, not that men must dominate, but that in knowing the difference between reflection and reality, you finally become something real. Not loved because you're lost, but respected because you've returned to yourself. And that's the only kind of love worth keeping.